All right. Now down to the big philosophical argument. Here's where I justify to every atheist and half of the rest of the world why I have my beliefs. So let's fucking go. Just kidding. I'm never going to pretend fully that I know the answer to any type of argument from any part of the world. And even among fellow pagans and Hellenics, I know my opinion isn't very common. But here we go, for real. I was a teenage anti-theist. Yes, I know that sounds like a title to a shitty Christian-made horror movie with loads of satanic imagery, sexual innuendo, faith criticism, and swearing. But no, I really was an anti-theist for a couple of years. I believe I mentioned it before, but up until then, most of my friends were either Christians themselves or only people I hung out with through church activities. But with high school, I was thrown into a new environment, and the friends I found were atheists or anti-theists. My best friend, who is still one of my closest friends, was in the latter category. We talked openly about religion, often with it devolving into jokes and insults at the more absurd aspects of religion and Christianity specifically. We were assholes. Like I think most guys can agree they were as teenagers. The thing is, I was already well on my way out the door when it came to my childhood religion, Mormonism. I'd lost interest in the church years prior and only kept up with going to activities and church out of duty to my parents. And hanging out with my friends and gathering other viewpoints, I grew more bold with leaving the LDS church behind. Unfortunately, that came to a detriment to my attitude and behavior. To put it kindly, I was an asshole to my family. I openly mocked Christianity and became quite anti-theistic towards them. To that, I am always ashamed of how I acted, and to commend my family, they put up with it as best they could. And my parents even fully allowed me to not attend church because I asked not to. Of course, except on Easter and Christmas and a handful of other times. So I am very grateful to my parents for that and how tolerant they were of me being my embarrassingly long period of shithead behavior. Okay, so why tell you all that? How does that relate to this question? Well, a major argument with atheists and the like against religion is how can you justify all the evils and tragedies in the world if they are supposed to be loving and caring deities? And that's a hard one to answer fully, but to illustrate my views, let me tell you a story. Very recently, I had to put my dog down. He was in my life for 13 years, more time than he wasn't in my life. And yeah, it fucking sucked. It fucking sucked then. It's only been a few months since that vet visit, but it was honestly felt like it's been 4 years. The passage of time has been unreal. What's especially hard to deal with, and what often makes me cry out of nowhere, or gives me waking nightmares, is how it ended. You see, Bruce had a seizure in mid-June. It was completely out of nowhere to me and my fiance. We just came home from one night, and he was in the middle of a massive grand mal seizure. We rushed him to the emergency vet without much hesitation, and luckily they took him in and he got some help, but it was too late for him to be able to recover fully. Normally, like I've said before, a seizure can only last about 5 minutes before brain damage is likely. Bruce seized for at least 30 minutes. We don't know how long he'd been seizing for before we got home, but from the time we found him to the time we noted he had stopped for was at least half an hour. He was held for observation at the vet overnight, and we picked him up the next day. And from the looks of all the staff there, they were shocked that he was leaving with us alive. But that's only the start of how bad things got. For the following 5 days after we got him home, his behavior got more concerning, and it was clear by the end that he had some major brain damage from the seizure. For those 5 days, he paced our apartment almost nonstop. The only times he stopped were when he was literally too exhausted and physically couldn't get up. That's the only time he slept, and even then, it was only for short bursts. Then it was back to the pacing. And for the first few days, he had trouble staying upright, dragged his feet a lot, so he got sores on his ankles from the friction of the carpet. Now, again, like I've said before, pacing is a sign that dogs and other animals are extremely anxious, especially with predatory aligned animals like dogs. Think a panther or a tiger pacing back and forth in a zoo. It's their brain telling them to be on guard because if they stop and sleep, they could become prey to something else. Dogs are the same way. Bruce was in a constant state of that, and it was almost like he had absolutely no choice in the matter, and he was on autopilot to just pace and pace and pace. It was heartbreaking to watch day and night. He'd had behavior issues leading up to that seizure, stuff we were planning on bringing up to his regular vet in a couple of weeks from then. But as the days after his seizure went, we could see that just he was gone. Yeah, technically he was functioning, barely, as a being, but what made him Bruce was gone, erased by the seizure. By the end, he was having mini seizures whenever he slept, and we just had to put him down. So, the argument would go, how can you believe in deities if they allow for that to happen to such an amazing dog? How can you justify believing in a higher power when shit like that happens? To that I say this. I believe in the gods because I know bad shit is out there. I'm well fucking aware that bad shit happens and continues to happen. Sometimes to me, sometimes to other people. Almost no one deserves the tragedies that befall them, and I get it's easy to blame deities on it. If I could blame them or anyone else, I would. But I can't. At least for me, from that experience, it actually strengthened my belief in caring gods. Leading up to the event, during it all, and still now after it, I saw and was given signs from the gods that they were there for me. I didn't feel abandoned by them as I was struggling and continue to struggle. I felt comforted by my gods, and what I believe about them helps me cope with it. I got signs from Artemis and Hermes that they were there from the beginning. I know they helped guide Bruce to the underworld, the Rainbow Bridge, or wherever he went, and that he is taken care of. They've been with me during the hardest times in my life since I found them. In Hellenism and most pagan circles, the gods don't claim to be omniscient or any other claim of omni-whatever thing that the Abrahamic God does. There's no divine plan, no divine purpose. With how I see them, the gods are just as of the universe as we are. Sure, they have divine power and are on a level higher than us, as I tend to say, but they don't control the good or evil in the world. They didn't create the world or any concept of good or evil. They are just as they need to be. And I think even ancient beings viewed it that way. That's why Apollo is the god of medicine and music, but also of plague and disease. Poseidon is the god of the seas and horses, but also the bringer of destructive storms. All the gods are associated with things we see as positive and things that we view as negative. Sometimes it's something we have power to control or domain over. Sometimes it's just something they're associated with through SPG and myth. The gods have a vested interest in us, sure, but they aren't bodyguards and only there to make our lives happy. The universe is chaotic and a roulette wheel of happiness and tragedy. Sometimes shit falls on 00 and we just have to deal with it. I know that all during my problems with Bruce and on all of my other shitty fucking days, and those days were the happiest ones of other people's lives. Children were born, people were finding their partners, getting engaged, getting married, while I was sitting in a dark room watching my dog die. Just as I know when I was my most happy, when I was proposing to my fiance, playing with Bruce, other people were watching loved ones die, taking their last breaths, or getting their lives torn apart. During hard times, some people turn to religion for comfort. They see their deity or deities as comforting presences, and it keeps them from turning on the world or themselves. Other people are sated by the knowledge that the world is chaotic and there's nothing for them to look out to in a higher power. Both views are valid, and as long as they aren't disparaging others' rights to believe in what makes them survive shitty times. I can't explain it further than that. The gods are there, and they help influence our lives. Sometimes they can keep bad things from happening and give us good things, but sometimes they are just out of their depth and the shitty things happen anyway. Sometimes things happen to teach us lessons, make us stronger, better people, or to help us appreciate what we have and the happy times. Sometimes awful things happen just because things can happen. Kids can get bone cancer. Talented people die young and in awful ways. Good dogs suffer and get put down. I'm sorry if that doesn't work as a reason. I'm sorry if it's an awful thing to believe. And I'm sorry if it makes me sound like a shitty person. But for me, I know that my gods are there for me. And I've gotten through some shit times because of them. But anyway, thanks for listening.